Hello, this is a short, simple tutorial on basic use of layers, which is the backbone of Photoshop. Layers are what give Photoshop its strength as an editing tool. So, first you would have to open up a Photoshop document. I've already opened one here, but you can open a new one real easy. Go up to File, New, and you pick the dimensions, resolution, give it a name. They have some prefab sizes you can pick from in the drop down. And then you click OK and you're all set with a new one of your own. Okay, I've already got one here. And in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to take several images, put them together, and through the power of layers create a beautiful little manip like this, a lovely photo montage with everything playing nice and sized and working together. So, ready to get started? Here we go. First thing you need to do is open your individual images in Photoshop. I've already opened 3 images down here. They're little separate windows. Okay. The way to do that, you have 2 ways. You can go into use Photoshop to open them by going to File, Open, which opens up a window, a navigation window, and you just go to whatever picture you want and double click on the picture and it'll open up in Photoshop as a separate image like I have down here. Or you can just open any folder on your computer where you store your images, right click on an image, double click on and choose, you right click on the image and choose Open With, and then choose Photoshop, and it'll open up again as a separate image in your Photoshop program. Okay, so now we need to get these pictures into the manipulation folder, the PSD file, that's Photoshop document file, so that you can move them around and work with them together. So we're going to, there are 3 ways of doing it. So we've got this little lady here. By the way, these checkerboard background just means that her background is transparent. The only pixels on this image are hers, what you see for the figure and nothing else. So first way to do this is you hit Select, All, Edit, Copy. Okay, now I can reduce the window and I just go over here and it's a simple cut and paste. Just hit Control V and there she is. Now you can rename your layers in Photoshop. I strongly recommend it. You get enough layers going, it starts getting hard to find things. Okay, so just double click on the name and then type in whatever you want. Okay, now I'm going to turn my background layer here off. See these little eye icons? They turn the visibility for individual layers on and off. Okay, so now that ugly white default background in Photoshop is invisible. Okay, now to bring in another image. I've got a layer here with columns. Very useful, again, on a transparent background. Okay, now the second way to import an image onto a separate layer, as you can see, whichever image I have open, selected on the window here, has its own layers palette. Okay, and so I would select that layer, right click, and pick Duplicate Layer, and then choose the PSD file I want added to. In this case, Manipping 101. Click OK, and as you can see, it's now here. This tool over here on your Tools palette, that's your Move tool. You can see I can just move it around because it's on a separate layer. Okay, let's label that Columns. Okay, now we need to bring in another image. Okay, now as you can see, I've opened up an image with this cloud background which I painted earlier. Okay. Here's the third way you can add a new image as a separate layer on your photo. You just go down here again, because if I had my manipping thing, as you can see the layers palette changes, but I've got the clouds background here selected, that window, which means its layer palette is showing. All I have to do is go down here, left click on that layer, and drag it right over onto the new PSD file. And there it is. Okay, so now we have 3 layers that are ready to be put together. Problem is, all you can see are the clouds, the painted clouds, and that's because it's in front of everything. Well, we don't want that. We want, this is where you learn about the importance of layer order. Because the cloud is a solid layer with no transparencies, I can't see through it. We need to have that behind the lady, which is where it would be in real life. So this is our layer stack. Okay, in order to move layers around, it's very easy. You just left click and drag it down to the bottom of the stack. Okay, so now the clouds are behind everything, which is where we want them. The columns, however, in front of the lady. We don't want that. We want the lady in front of the columns. So again, select that layer, left click, drag it below the layer. So now it's between the clouds and the lady layer. So kind of like a little sandwich of layers here. You have your background, your columns, and the lady. And we can play with our visibilities and show whatever we want. Okay, now everything's too big. So now we need to edit the different layers individually in order to make them work together. So we need to make this background smaller. So we're going to go to Edit, Transform, Scale. I'm going to change the scale of it. Now, this is very important. Never forget this next step. See up here? These are the controls for the changing the scale of that one layer. Okay? This icon right here, where it says Maintain Aspect Ratio. Okay? You must turn that on. Click on it, and that will lock the width and the height so that when you change one, or you drag on a corner, however you do it, okay, it will always change the height and the width by the exact same percentage. Okay, if you do not do this, you're going to end up with a distorted image, and nobody likes looking at distorted images. So, to change the size, you can drag on the corners as you just saw, or you can go up here and just type in the numbers you want. Okay, this at 100% is too big, so typing in a smaller percentage will give me a smaller picture. I'm going to reduce it about 20%, so I would want to enter the number 80 here, because 80 is 20% smaller than 100. Okay, and then, by the way, while you're in the middle of a transform, you can still move things around to center and get an idea as to how they look. Okay, now I can select any of my tools over here, and that will allow me to complete the transformation. So I'm going to pick my Move tool. I get the little dialog window asking me if I want to apply the transformation, and yes, I do. Okay, now it's still too big, so I want to make it about 20% smaller again. Okay, so go down here, Edit, Transform, and instead of going to Scale, since I want to make it smaller by the same amount, I can just hit Again, because Photoshop will remember the very last change you made on transformations and selections. It won't remember anything else, but it will remember the very last change. And that's about right on the side. Okay, so we've got our background out in order. So now we're going to select the columns layer. Turn the visibility on. Again, too big. So remember what I said, it always remembers the last change, so we can hit Transform again. And move, Edit, Transform again. Edit, Transform again. And drag it around, see how we like. I think one more time. Okay, now, so that's positioned about right. Now move on to the lady. Select the lady layer. Okay, turn on the visibility. And we're going to size her down also. Now, I was doing about 20%. Backgrounds and everything can be a little more forgiving. On figures and faces especially, I recommend doing smaller increments. Okay? No more than 10%. Why? Because when Photoshop is transforming these images, it's resampling the pixels. I'm going to make her 10% smaller. Okay? And when it's basically resampling is Photoshop looking at the change you want and making its best guess as to which pixels to remove or to fill in. And best guess from a computer isn't always the best choice. So we've reduced her 10%. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to keep doing it again until I get her to the size I want. I don't recommend, like I said, I recommend doing changes like this in increments of no more than 10% because you get the lowest amount of artifacts. And you can zoom in and take a close look at them in the process again and see and repairing the artifacts as they start occurring before it gets too nasty. Okay, that's getting pretty close. Not quite there yet. One more time, I think. Okay, now we got it roughly sized and cost and put together. But let's take a look at the lighting. On this picture we see light beams, so light's coming from this direction on the painted backgrounds. We look at the columns, you see light on that side and dark on that side. So the lighting's coming from this direction on the columns. So far so good. Let's take a good look at the lady. And we've got light on this cheek and dark on this cheek. That's the opposite of what we got on the columns in the background. So we're going to change her again. We're going to flip her over so that her lighting matches the background and columns. So edit, transform, flip horizontal. Now, if you were working like with this lady I created in a 3D program, okay, so we can flip her if we want. But if you were working like, say, a celebrity image or a real person's face, I would recommend at that point flipping both the columns and the background instead, because people's faces in real life aren't very symmetrical. And if you flip them, they look odd. So generally don't flip figures or faces. Flip inanimate objects and backgrounds. Okay, but she's not real, so we flipped her this time. A little faster. Okay, now I think I maybe want her a little bit smaller. So edit, transform, scale. Now if I'd hit again, she would have flipped horizontal because, like I said, Photoshop only remembers the last thing you did on these things. Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay. Now, I've got it basically scaled and put together, but the lighting and the coloring isn't 100%. So, we're going to play around with that so that everything becomes more harmoniously put together. Now, I'm going to select the columns layer because it's a little too dark and dull, not enough contrast for the bright, sunny background we've got here. So, we could go up to Image, Adjustments, and then we could choose any one of these adjusting tools in Photoshop. They're great. Problem with doing it that way is the adjustment wouldn't be made directly on the pixels of that layer, which means it would be a destructive change. Once you make that change, you can't undo it beyond however many layers of history you have. And by the way, this is the history palette. Okay, I can keep going back through that, but it's defaulted to only 20 moves. So beyond 20 and you can no longer undo things unless you go into your settings and increase that. The more you increase, the more steps you allow it to keep track of, the more memory you're going to use up. So it's rough call as to how many steps you want to keep. I usually have it set at about 100 myself. Okay, anyways, back to our little manip here. Okay, the columns are too dull. So I want to make a change, but instead of making the change directly on the layer, I want to make it non-destructively. So I'm going to go up here to Select, Load Selection, okay, and then click OK. See the moving dotted line, commonly called the marching ants? That tells me that Photoshop has selected all the pixels on this layer that I'm using right now. Now I'm going to go down here and see this little yin and yang looking symbol here. I'm going to click on that, and now I have a choice of most of the adjustment tools, only they're going to be applied as an adjustment layer. I'm going to pick levels here. Okay, as you can see, it opened it up. It also opened, see down here, a new layer. Okay, so the changes are occurring on a separate adjusting layer. Okay, now I want to make this brighter and more ethereal, so I'm going to grab this middle slider and I'm going to lighten up the mid-tones. Okay, and I'm going to grab this far right slider and brighten up my highlights. And that's more like something up in the clouds. Okay, let's click OK. Now at any point in time I can toggle the visibility off if I don't like the change and want to just get rid of it. I could delete the layer if I wanted, or I can double click on this part of the layer and it'll open up the adjustment part again, and I can change the adjustments further. Okay, that's why it's non-destructive. No matter how many steps I do after this, I can always go directly to this adjustment layer and change that adjustment. Okay, now I want to adjust the color because the colors on the columns aren't harmonious with the background. Okay, I want to change the colors some. Again, I could go up to Image, Adjustments, and make it destructively, but I'm not going to do that. I can go to Select, Load Selection, but I don't have to because the last thing I selected was the columns. So I can just hit Select, Reselect. Okay? Remember, Photoshop remembers the last thing you did when it comes to transformations and selections. The very last thing and only the very last thing. Okay? So, now I've got that selected. I'm going to go down here, pick an adjustment layer for color balance. Okay? Now, color balance, you have highlights, shadows, and mode tones can be adjusted separately. I want an overall adjustment, so I'm going to choose midtones. Okay? It's a little too green and sallow, kind of a bit yellow. So whichever direction I move my slider, it's going to add whatever colors on that is going to add that color into the mix. You know, so if I a little too much there, but you get the idea. Okay? So I'm just going to watch my image and I'm going to add in a little bit of magenta to pink it up and pick up these mauve tones down here. Okay? So I'm also going to add in just a snickle of blue to pick up my blue highlights. Okay. Just a little bit. And there you go. Okay. Now, if I were to move my column, because say I decided, oh, I want it a little lower in the frame, oops, you know, problem. My adjustments didn't come with it. Okay, so I'm going to go up my history palette here and click one step up to undo that move. Now I'm going to highlight my columns, hold down Shift, and go up to the top adjustment layer so that all of them are highlighted. Now I'm going to go down here and click on this little paperclip type icon, and that will link my layers together. Okay, now when I move my columns around, their adjustment layers move with them. They've been linked, they've been attached together. Okay, now we're going to go adjust our lady. Her lighting's pretty good now that we flipped her, but she's a little bit, again, a little to the green side for the rest of the picture. So we're going to, again, select Load Selection. Okay, go down, open up Adjustment layer for color balance. Okay, and we're just going to pink her up a little bit. Not a lot, just enough to make her blend. As you can see, it's a subtle adjustment, but it just makes her more part of the picture. Okay, now we've done our basic composing and sizing and scaling, so we now have a well-composed picture with everything working together. Now, sometimes you're going to want to add more. So we go down here, see where it says, this icon says Create New Layer, click, and now you've got a new layer. There are no pixels at all on this layer. Absolutely nothing. Okay, I'm going to pick my paintbrush tool. What I want to do is add a little bit of mist. You know, this thing is up in the cloud, so let's tie it all together with a little bit of misty things. So I've picked my paintbrush tool. I need to pick a color. Okay, we would not want black clouds, so let's pick something out of the background here. Clouds usually aren't totally white if you sample them in a photograph. So let's pick over here and see, very, very light, pale, almost white, but not quite, but it's a very pale blue. Okay, now I've already collected a cloud brush. You just, you know, click on this little arrow down while you've got the paintbrush to, and you'll get a palette that opens up. I need to make that smaller. Okay, and it lets you pick whatever brushes you have loaded. Okay, so now, since again I'm working on a separate layer, so this is a non-destructive change. It will not apply it directly to the layers below, but only above. And I'm going to just stamp a little bit of cloud layers here and here. And I could open up a separate layer for each of these if I wanted to. Maybe I'll pick another cloud brush to do a little bit more over on the other side. Okay. And there you have. Now we have clouds. Some painted clouds on top of everything. You can turn it on and off. As you can see, it just helps pull everything together. It's a little bit bright there, so I'm going to take my eraser tool and I'm going to lower the opacity. The clouds are just a little too thick in that one corner. And I'm just going to slowly erase a little bit of it, so it's a softer effect. Okay, and we're done. Okay, so we now have this lovely little picture. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers, which is a pretty simple image. And everything is working together and playing nice. Okay, and you hit save and you're done. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you.